Okay, my name is Todey. I am the state climatologist for South Dakota up at SDSU. I have been there about 9.5 years now. And unfortunately, this is our second major drought event we've gone through in the time that I've been here. I can't count 2002 because I interviewed during 2002, so I won't count that as my tenure here. So what we're going to talk about today is, kind of get an update, a little bit about where we are, and then what we can say going forward. I'm not going to be glowingly optimistic and say we're going to be done with this soon, because I don't think we can be, but we do have some optimistic things we can see looking ahead. So what I'd like to do is, first thing, are there any questions anybody has up front, or things that they want to ask about as we get rolling? Okay. All right. Any questions you have along the way, please shout them out, and we'll deal with them as we go along. The other person that you saw the picture of, her name's Laura Edwards. She's during the extension reorganization, she's an extension field specialist up in Aberdeen. We correspond frequently and share things back and forth often as to what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and so you'll see stuff written by her, written by me. We usually share them back and forth so we know what the other one is writing about. Okay, first thing we're going to hit at is kind of some, just kind of review the status situations. Our speakers are going to hit on some more of these as we go along. Kind of what has happened right now, as we go along in drought, the main focus we point to is the U.S. Drought Monitor. That's become recognized as the direct relationship, or the direct guide as to what's happening in the way of drought, determining what the drought conditions are. It's not perfect for every area, but it's kind of a guide, and it does end up being used for federal farm programs as a trigger mechanism. So the week-to-week status, I've got the new week ones set up. It hasn't shown up on iGrow yet. It should be very soon, but we'll show you the new one here today. We've kind of reached a stabilizing point with the U.S. Drought Monitor. Conditions have not been getting worse. I mean, corn whatever happened to corn has been done is done. Soybeans, we've had a little bit of help for soybeans, not as much as we'd like to see, but no big changes one way or the other. There's been a little bit of tinkering. In the last couple weeks, we've had a little bit of precipitation in a few places, so we've made some changes because of that. So we have seen slightly cooler temperatures, which has helped relieve some of the stressful situations, although when you have obviously no moisture, it doesn't matter too much. And that's been based on, we've had the last 4 to 6 weeks, we had very rapid changes going on through that. Not as much around here. I don't think there have been many fires around this area, have there, recently? There have been more out west. I did during the State Drought Task Force, someone mentioned up near Aberdeen, on their farm up near Aberdeen, they had a lightning spark of fire on their farm. And they said it's not supposed to happen in eastern South Dakota. It's a more West River sort of thing. So that's been an example of what's going on. Again, our crop damage, you know this as well as I do. Corn in many areas mostly done. Soybeans, are really to a last point here. We're getting any kind of benefit for them at all. Water and feed shortages for cattle. Been a lot of requests, I don't know in this area, but other places we've been hearing about requests to add to rural water so that they can make use of rural water for their cattle. And then obviously water quality issues because of some of this. Some irrigation shutoff orders in some places around the state too. Okay, where this starts, kind of where this came from. The beginnings of this actually come from last fall. This is departure from normal, departure from average precipitation, September to November last year. Your scale is here. Anything that's in green, purple is above average. Anything that goes from yellow to red is below average. So we're down here along the border of Nebraska, South Dakota. You see 4 to 6 inches below average precipitation last fall. Made a great harvest season. Didn't have to slow down very much, very little delays. But we didn't get the kind of soil moisture recharge. Now, I recognize this, and we were kind of aware of it, but we weren't throwing up red flags yet because I looked at some data, and we looked at dry falls. What does that mean for yields the following year? And there was not a strong signal that showed up. There were some bad years, but there are also some fairly decent years after dry falls. So I wasn't too concerned about it just yet. We were aware of it. But then we get around to this year. Let's skip ahead and Well, okay. We'll skip ahead to where we've been at this point right now. Let's get up here. Last 30 days. Last 30 days, just pulled these maps up. Total precipitation, departure from normal precipitation. And you can see here, you know, the story is very clear. Not a lot of moisture, a lot of places. Northeast South Dakota, and this is South Dakota. I'll show Nebraska here in just a second. Departure from average precipitation, whole southeastern part of the state, much of South Dakota, down in Nebraska, you know, 2 to, you know, almost 4 inches below average precipitation. Here's Nebraska, same situation, very little precipitation, you know, 2 to 4 inches below average, and this is just in the last 30 days. This is not even going back or including what happened before that. Coupled that with departure from average temperatures. You know, here we are in the Nebraska-South Dakota line, 6 to 8 to 10 degrees above average, okay? If you want above average temperatures, you want it in the spring or in the fall. You don't want it in the middle of summer. Well, that's what we've had, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, has really put us in the bad situation, coupled on top of the additional, the lack of rainfall that we saw. Let's skip through those and kind of get to where we are with the drought monitor. What this has led to, what's happening with the drought monitor. This is the regional view of it, not the national view. Okay, again, the scale of this is that D0 is abnormally dry, means there's dry conditions, but it's not much of an impact. D1, moderate drought, then goes up to D4, exceptional drought. And you can see down in this area right here, extreme drought, some pockets of exceptional drought down in Nebraska. A little bit better as you go further north in South Dakota, only severe drought. But, you know, very serious situations going on. Now, there are scales that go along with this. D3 is considered should be about a 1 in 20 year, about once every 20 years average, or about a 5% chance of happening. So you do have some kind of scale for the frequency we want to see with that. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. That's my point of optimism, is that we see, I'll get to that. Hold me to it. I'll show you that slide. The other thing is the scale of this, how widespread this is. Here's we are in the whole middle part of the country. You see almost all the Corn Belt into the southern plains, almost all that area D3 to D4. Last year, you know, you heard about Texas and Oklahoma and the south, but it was very strong, but it was confined down there. This year they decided to share with the whole country and give everybody else a taste of drought. So you can see that going from nearly the Appalachians over most of the rest of the country is in pretty serious situations. The only place it's really not, it gets into northeast South Dakota and over into Minnesota. The folks that are probably going to get a pretty good yield out of this whole situation. And just so you think, just a memory, this was sent to me today by the state climatologist in Missouri. This was from August 10th, 1934. And you compare with what we see on the drought monitor now with crops uneven and southwest, water supply very low. Isn't that the way it always is in the southwest, that they don't have much of a water supply down there? Anyway. Okay, some other scale issues. You know, talked about this with the Corn Belt. This is the Corn Belt areas in drought. The green areas, the dark areas are the main Corn Belt areas, and then the lighter are the lesser Corn Belt areas. This is why, obviously, why the markets are going nuts on this. You see Minnesota and a little bit of South Dakota, the only major corn growing areas that are outside drought conditions. The bulk of the main part of the corn growing area in serious drought issues. Hay, for those of you trying to buy hay, here's the other reason why you can't find any. The major hay growing areas, only parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, out of it, and then even parts of Canada. They've been a bit wet up there in southern parts of Canada. So that's the reason hay is in such short supply, because of all the areas, the hay growing areas in drought. I should have bought this back up early, but one more scale situation. Not only have we been warm recently, January to June, warmest on record for nearly this whole middle part of the country, which has a twofold effect on it. One, as we talked about earlier, warmer than average conditions, higher crop water use, but then it was also so warm we extended the growing season. Things started growing earlier because conditions were warm enough for them to go, so we used our limited soil moisture over a longer period of time, and we used it up faster because of the high ET rates. And here's an example of that. This is from the Southeast Research Farm. We've got an automated weather station there. These are alfalfa ET, a reference ET, basically how much demand is the atmosphere putting on a crop? How much water is the atmosphere trying to pull out of a crop? And you can see all the other years, 2004 to 2011 that we've had the station there, are here. Here's where we are in 2012. We put over, you know, all of the rest of them were from, say, 18 to 22. This year we were up around 28. Over 5 inches additional moisture to be taken from the crop. So that helps explain why, why we've, obviously we didn't have much rainfall, but we dried things down a whole lot faster than we usually would. Other records for the June-July period. These are stations from June-July that were all-time lowest precipitation. Another 10 stations were in the top 5. Yankton itself, 1.51 inches from June 1st until today. That's over 1 inch less than the previous record. 1 inch less than the previous record. And 1936, which is kind of the drought record around here, same time period had 2.8 inches. So we had half of what they had in 1936. So we are well on the scale of crazy things going on. Temperature-wise, these stations, not as many in the southeast, more out west that were warmest on record. Another 30 were in the top 5. Yankton was the 5th warmest on record during that time period. Okay, here's the good news portion of this, okay? You asked about back-to-back droughts. This is a plot from the Southeast Climate Division of South Dakota, basically about south of Sioux Falls and over to not quite the river. This is an average of all the stations in that area, and then each of these dots is the total precip for that year. You know, like here was the wet year of 43 or 47, I can't remember which one that was, I think 47. And then, these couple in the Dust Bowl here, 36 being the low one right there. There's a lot of up and down to this, and that's the way precipitation is. The red line is an overall trend line, and then the green line is kind of a running mean. But what you see, especially in these wetter periods, wetter period here in the 40s, what do you see in the middle of this? Even in this wetter period, you have some dry years. Wetter period here in the late 50s, early 60s, there's some dry periods. In the early 80s, there's some dry years here. In the 90s, there are some dry years here. Over the last several years, we've really not had a dry year. We've had about 4 years back-to-back of pretty wet. That's why my thinking is that this is our dry year in the middle of this overall wet period. So that's why I'm being optimistic that we can recover, maybe not completely, but have at least a decent year next year. Because even in the middle of all these wet periods, you have some kind of a dry one, and we've not had that one. So that's kind of where we're going, what we're thinking right now. Okay, let's go ahead to the outlooks here. Where we're headed right now, hot off the press, 8 to 14 day outlook for temperature and precipitation. We seem to be in kind of a pattern change. Throughout the summer, we've had a ridge of high pressure that's been parked in some form over the middle part of the U.S., and the top of it has been right near us. That's why there's been storms that have kind of been tantalizing us over part of the area, but mainly have stayed to the north. So the pattern change seems to be indicating that we're going to get a better chance of cooler temperatures as we get to the middle part of the month. We're seeing some of that right now. And the green area indicates increased chances for precipitation. Now down here we're kind of on that borderline area, but we are hinting at what could be something of a pattern change, of something starting to happen to change. It's probably going to be into the fall before we see much of a big time pattern change, but we'll keep an eye on it. These outlooks, I should say, are from the Climate Prediction Center. You can go view these. The links are right here. You can go view them whenever you want to. August outlooks, also from the Climate Prediction Center, part of NOAA. The brown areas, greatly increased chance of being warmer than average for the month. That'll likely end up being the case. It may not be terribly warm, but still probably warmer than average. And then likely to be overall drier than average. Given we haven't had much precip at this point, we'd have to change fairly quickly to start increasing the amount of we'd have to increase the amount of precipitation to cover that for the month. As we go on August, September, October, the 3-month out, the 90-day, indicating likely above average chances for above average temperatures. The white area is saying not much in the way of precip for us, not much chances, not giving good indications of whether we're better chances for below or above, okay? So we don't have good signals one way or the other. There's one modifier I want to put on that. Now these are ones that were released last month. The new ones will come out next Thursday, and I expect to see some fairly significant changes in these outlooks, which I'll talk about here in a second. The other outlook product is the U.S. Drought Monitor outlook. Basically says, where is the drought status right now? How's that going to change, okay? The brown area indicates likely, it says to persist or intensify. I don't expect it to intensify at this point. I just don't think we're going to get a lot of improvement in the near term. As the fall goes on, I expect we'll see the drought issues reduced, and we'll see the drought monitor levels dropped, but not in the immediate time frame. Okay, a little more outlook issues. Everybody hears about El Nino, La Nina, okay? We've been flip-flopping back and forth the last several years between the two. And what this is showing you, this is the Pacific Ocean right here, and this is the equator. South America, Central America, Australia, Southeast Asia. Looking at the sea surface temperatures, anomalies, differences from averages on the sea surface temperature. And you can see that as time goes on, you see this brown area developing. That's warmer than average waters. This scale is in degrees Celsius. Multiply it by about 1.8 actually, to get degrees Fahrenheit. You see warming water here. That's indicative of El Nino coming up. El Nino is starting to reoccur, and it's likely going to come back this fall. What's that mean for us? How many of you remember your college statistics? Okay, we got one who'll fess up. Okay, we got two, all right. Come on up and talk about box and whisker plot. No, that's okay. What this is showing, this is comparing September, October, November precipitation, climatological fall, comparing El Nino, La Nina, and neutral conditions. And what this shows is the red is the middle part of the distribution, or the median, and then these are the extremes. So you can see that during El Nino falls, we have a better chance for more precipitation. And it looks pretty likely El Nino is going to be happening this fall. So that's another bit of optimism that we could get in the way of recharge. The other piece of optimism I've been talking with people about, if you've taken corn off for silage or whatever, you're not drawing any more moisture out of that. So any rain that does start falling is going to go back to recharge that soil moisture. So that's another positive aspect we have going on right now. Fall temperatures during El Nino events, tendency towards a little bit cooler. With precipitation, that would make sense. With more precipitation, that makes sense. That should not be an issue for us. You know, sometimes we'd be concerned about early freeze. Early freeze is not an issue this year. Anything's done at this point, or if it's still alive, it's going to reach its maturity before any chance for freeze comes around. So we don't see any issue with that. Okay, kind of summarize, put a cap on this. It looks like we're in kind of a pattern change here as we're getting into mid-August, late part of August. That's a good thing. Probably cooler, maybe a little bit better chance for precipitation as time goes on. We'll have to keep an eye on this. Longer term, El Nino is likely in the fall, does increase chances for precipitation. Likely, that's for only soil moisture recharge. That's what the recharge only means. Not going to be soon enough to help out, have an impact, say, on soybeans or whatever, but start getting to soil moisture recharge. And this is our state climate website. You can find additional information along with what is on iGrow. So this is going to be changing here fairly soon. We have a new version of this coming up. And then Rosie also talked about iGrow Drought. Okay, one other thing to talk to you about. How many of you have heard about cocoa raws? Okay, we got a couple. What is this? It's not a rain gauge. It's a high-tech precipitation monitoring device. Come on, guys, work with me, okay? Okay. Okay, what can this do for you? All right. We are trying to get more data always around the state. I showed you data from our automated weather station at the Beersford farm. at the Southeast Research Farm. You know, trying to get more information available for people. But the bigger one we're always trying to deal with is rainfall, okay, because of the extreme variability of rainfall. Now, official rainfall totals for any place in the state go back to the National Weather Service Co-op Observer. There's one here there's one in Vermilion, there's one in Yankton, there's one in Tyndall. That is considered the official data. And that is the, you know, when it comes down to documenting what happens, we've got to go back to that data. But this is a nationwide network of volunteers who report precipitation. If you're a good reporter and you have, you know, people reporting around the county reporting this precipitation, that can end up helping you, because then we can go back and say, well, the co-op station had this amount, but we've got 3 observers over in this part of the county that had an inch less. So we can go back and try to help document wet or dry periods. This is something anybody can do, kids can do. We're a little bit short down in this part of the state. I'd like to have some people doing that. The people on the Nebraska side, you can do part of it too. Nebraska has its own network called Any Rain, but you can be part of it. All you have to do is get yourself a rain gauge, and we can give you a pamphlet on where to sign up. So it's a good piece of information, can help you keep track of how much rainfall you've had. It helps us. Any reports that go there get back to us immediately. It shows up on a website immediately. I can show you more about it later. But I need to wrap up right now. So are there any questions you have for me at this point?
Rain don't come in the fall, the snow doesn't come by January. What do we expect after January?
Okay, there is a tendency for late winter, early spring, another little bump in precip during El Nino events. It's not a big one, but there is a little bit of a bump chance there. There's no strong signal otherwise during the winter, during El Nino winters in the way of precipitation. So, you know, from a cattle standpoint, obviously we could use some good snowstorms this winter. To get some more runoff and any kind of additional precipitation. But, you know, if we don't have much snow, you know, our surface water issues are going to stay with us. So, yeah, Alvin.
Going back to the first question, chances of back-to-back drought, because like 88, everyone remembers that, but 89 was worse for us west of town.
Okay.
88. And a lot of people are likening this year to 34. Those are 2 very different setups. And your probability is, what is the greatest probability that you could foresee?
You know, certainly we're deep enough into this that we can certainly carry some over into next year, and you could get some places that could still be as bad again next year. I can't say we're going to resolve it. But the things are looking like we're going to at least get down the path of resolving these issues. And it depends on what kind of things you're talking about. We could recharge soil moisture decently to get a decent crop next year, but we're going to need some heavier rainfall events for the surface water issues for people with cattle and ponds and dugouts and things like that.
Okay, generally speaking, in dry years, did they rely a lot on snowfall to come up with their numbers?
For which?
Year-round moisture.
Well, yeah, I mean, you always account, when you talk about year-round precipitation, you also account for snowfall. So 36, I think, was a fairly bad winter. I think there was a decent amount of snow in the winter of 36, which, you know, pointed out how bad the summer of 36 really was. We didn't have much snow last year here, so that was part of our overall water issue too. So I can't say it is or it isn't next year. I wish I could. I wish I could have told you this was going to happen last year. Of course, if I could do that, I could make a lot of money doing something else. But
Texas went through about 3 years of drought.
Yes.
And down the Gulf, don't they get most of their moisture up out of the Gulf problems?
Yes.
The Gulf storms?
Yeah.
What about us? I mean, we see it sometimes coming through Nebraska.
What we have not, and with that ridge parked over us, we've not had occasions where you get enough, you know, what we need to have is a trough over the southwest that brings up southerly flow and then brings that moisture up to us. We've just not had any period of time like that. So.
Do you have that graph that you showed the wet and dry years on a website somewhere?
Actually, I can show you where it is. It's not us. It's a National Climatic Data Center, a NOAA website. You can go make those. It's really kind of a cool site, so you can get some kind of perspective on that.